Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of A Cast to the Past, where best friends get together to talk about old games in a new light. I'm Josh.
And I'm Tom.
You mean Bad Tom, right? Bad Tom.
What would yours be? Badosh?
Badash, yeah.
Badosh. But what could you possibly be referencing, Josh?
Well, today I'm referencing Celeste.
Oh, look at them. Look at those little cuties. Oh, that's excellent.
Yes, today, ladies and gentlemen, a long-awaited episode I've wanted to talk about for such a long time. We will be finally talking about 2018's hit indie title, Celeste.
So the rule of this podcast is that a game needs to be at least 3 years old for us to talk about it, because we figured that's enough time for general opinions about it to have settled, enough time for a game's legacy to have been left intact. And this is the tightest deadline of a game we have ever done. But Josh, this is undisputably your number one video game of all time, is that not?
Well,
True?
don't give away what I'm going to possibly think of this game, Tom.
Well, I just think it's important to be transparent up front. This is a game where Josh is going to gush nonstop, and I'm going to be talking about my experience with it. Not that like this is some usual game where like Josh loved something from the 90s that I never touched. I think we've both kind of experienced this in and around the same time. But yeah, long demanded episode from Josh.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, it's 3 years old. We'll do it.
So I have played and beaten this game numerous times. I didn't think I was actually going to go back and play it again after I beat it the first time, because I was like, this was an experience. I don't know if I'm ever going to want to do this again. And then I went back and played through it again, and it just brought more of a smile to my face. And I was extremely excited about it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it one more time. And I just recently played through it again on Twitch in one sitting, to where I've gotten pretty good at beating the game in a single session. I think our time was around like 4 hours it took us to beat the game. So, and then I went back and I platinumed it on the PlayStation 5. So, and I also included my playthrough was with the core and with Farewell, which is the final DLC. And I'm going to go into pretty great detail about Farewell when we get towards that part in the story. I don't know if you've played Farewell, Tom, did you?
Oh, we'll talk about the final DLC pieces as we get to it. But okay. Josh, we can't start any episode properly without a little bit of nitty gritty.
Oh, nitty gritty!
You have not done nitty gritty in quite a while. Do you remember how to do the nitty gritty?
You know, I do, and man, has it been a very long time since I've done this. Hold on, let me get some nitty gritty juice here.
It's been a minute. Oh, I've got my own. Hey, Josh, we're actually synced tonight. I ordered a case of this. Literally a case.
Oh my god, so good.
I can't have soda, but I need caffeine somehow, and coffee blows.
Oh, don't say that.
I said it.
I know you did. So
Josh,
the nitty gritty, Celeste, released January 25th, 2018. It launched on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, Windows, Mac, and our own lovely Linux-based consoles. Developed by Maddie Thorson and I believe Noel Berry as well. I'm going to give Noel Berry some credit on this one too. They programmed, designed the game, did all the artwork for it as well. It is published by Matt Makes Games, which only made another game prior to this, and that game was Towerfall. And I don't know if
you ever played Towerfall?
I have not, but if I'm not mistaken, Towerfall for a long time was an exclusive on the Ouya.
The console that took the world by storm, the Ouya?
It was released on the Ouya in 2013.
Oh my gosh. The killer app of the Ouya.
Yeah, so this game, wonderful, right? And I'm not even going to say, like, yes, Maddie and Noel are pinnacle pieces to this game right now, but there is one other person that really makes this title, and that is Lana Ray. Lana Rain. And she created some of the most wonderful, fantastic music that I've ever listened to in a video game. I want to talk about the creation of this game, though, right? Like, this game came off of, I guess, Maddie and Noel had a game jam session one night where they wanted, over the weekend, they wanted to create a game in a engine called the Pico 8.
Right, it's a virtual machine specifically. It's an accessible piece of computer programming that lives within it's a computer within a computer, basically.
Yeah, which is crazy. And the original version is available inside the game. You have to find it. But
that's something I really was blown away by, because when I was playing Celeste the first time, you find it on these little computers in the game, and you're like, initially I thought there was some kind of bonus feature. I was like, oh, how charming. They made a Celeste within a Celeste, and it's fully playable. Nice. But then I'm doing the research, and it's like, they made a full 30-level version of this game before the actual game? Yeah,
the idea was to create a game of a character struggling to climb a mountain, and that it felt very... it fit what they were trying to do. They were trying to climb a mountain of building a video game in 4 days, thus creating Celeste. And do you know how they got the title of Celeste?
I do, but tell our audience.
So they Googled cool mountain names, and Celeste Mountain was Celeste. It's not based off of that actual Celeste Mountain, but that was the coolest mountain name that they could think of for the game. So I thought that was pretty cool, pretty unique. So as I was going through and creating and playing Celeste and stuff like that, they grew fondly of the protagonist, and they wanted to kind of base a game around her and around what they've created in Celeste. So they hired some more people on, and they started building and building and building. And there's awesome documentaries out there that you can see of how they actually went ahead and built this game from the ground up. How every level is intertwined and interconnected, and there's multiple ways to go through each set level that you see. So you could either do it by jumping, you could do it by dashing, you could do it by wall climbing. Like, there's so many different ways to traverse every single level. And when I'm saying level, I mean screen. There's over 300 to 500 screens, I think they said, in this game, depending on how you would play through the game. So they consider those levels. So they say it's one game, 8 areas, 300 to 500 plus levels. So Maddie wanted to create a game that was based around their struggles with anxiety and depression. And I believe they successfully done this with the struggles and the conversations that you have with Thea, with Granny, with Mr. It's Mr.
Oshiro? I pronounced it Oshiro in my head.
And with Mr. Oshiro, there's so many ways that Madeline just thinks, and how she's struggling not only with communicating with people, but communicating with herself too, which we witness with Battleline being prominent throughout the majority of this game.
Well, I know you're very passionate about this game. It's got a lot of deep meaning for you, and I want to jump into it. Now, I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. I just want to get a few clarifications for our audience members in case they've somehow never heard of Celeste up to this point. That's okay. That's all right. So we want to talk about the gameplay. You mentioned some of the mechanics earlier. So just, Josh, is this just a simple 2D platformer?
No. So it is, first off, a pixel-perfect platformer, might I add.
It is. It is.
But no, you traverse the area. So what happens is when the screen appears, you have to get from point A to point B. You have to get across the screen. And you have to do this by running, jumping, climbing. You also have an ability called the air dash, which you would press your button and you give like a little jolt of energy to boost yourself up, almost kind of like a rocket blast almost. And at the beginning of the game, you can do that one time. Later on in the game, you can actually do that multiple times. And there's little items strung out across the world or the levels themselves where you can dash more than once if you hit these icons. There's other puzzles and stuff like that that will be included with this too. And there's also collectibles.
There are 3 key ones. Yep, strawberries. I think that they're probably the most common to find, but they are difficult to acquire.
Yep. Then you have the crystal hearts, which are very difficult to find. And then you have the cassette tapes. And these...
And what Yeah, what do they do, Josh?
These will unlock the B-sides of Celeste, which
Yes.
are more difficult versions of the levels that you are currently playing.
Oh my god, yes.
And then after you beat the B-sides, you unlock the C-sides, which are even more difficult levels.
That's funny because the B-sides were so difficult for me. I didn't even know there were C-sides, Josh.
There are C-sides, Tom, and you get to only dash once on the screen.
Ugh.
It doesn't reset until you move over to the next level.
I think that's all the bare bones work we have to do to talk about what I think makes this game very noteworthy and special. And it's the things you talked about. You talked about the story and the journey the characters go on. And you talked about the themes that this game tackles. So I would like to just kind of talk to you about what this game does and how you feel about it. So, as Josh was kind of going over, story about a young woman named Madeline. She's stubborn and sassy, but, high-spirited and overall very friendly. And she decides that her life is in a rut and she needs to do something big to kind of give herself perspective, give herself, a feeling of accomplishment. So she decides, I'm going to go climb the tallest mountain near my house. And so she arrives at the base of Mount Celeste, encounters a kooky older woman. She meets a variety of characters, explores a variety of destinations. There's an abandoned city at the beginning of the climb. There's a spooky old hotel. There's a temple. So this is just the most unique mountain peak in all of Canada. Every step of the way, not only does she meet unique characters, but a specific character is brought out of Madeline, and that is, as Josh mentioned, the character Badaline, who represents all of Madeline's self-loathing and anxiety and doubt. And she basically negs Madeline the entire climb, you shouldn't be doing this, you're stupid, this is a waste of time. Anytime Madeline is trying to help somebody, she's, why are you taking pity on that person? They're a waste of space, what are you doing? And so it's not just the physical obstacles of the world Madeline has to overcome, it's also the inner obstacles which are manifesting in this spooky doppelganger. Tell me about your first experience playing through this game. What was it like? What did you think of the characters and the stories that unfolded? Hit me with what you remember from that first special playthrough.
Let's go back a little bit before that too. So
okay.
I remember browsing the internet one day, and I remember seeing a bunch of people going crazy over an indie title getting a perfect 10 out of 10. There's no way that an indie title can get a perfect 10 out of 10. This is ridiculous. What is it about this game? What's going on? How is this happening?
Can I ask a question? Where was the 10 out of 10 given?
I believe it was IGN that did it at the time.
Oh, well, they give out 10 out of 10s like
no,
it's
they
candy on
don't.
Halloween.
No, they don't.
They can.
They can. Yes, they can, but they don't. But I was like, that's weird because, at the time...
They gave Skyward Sword a 10 out of 10. Okay, let's get real.
That is
let's
true.
Get real here.
But I was so intrigued. I'm like, what is about this? And then I heard more people talking about it. And I was like, this is weird. People were talking about Celeste and people were talking about Hollow Knight. And I'm like, I feel like I need to try one of these. And I picked up Celeste. And I was like, this is fun. It looks kind of Super Meat Boy-ish. So I was like, it's going to be very difficult platformers, and I'm going to hate myself as I play through it. And then as I start playing through it, I'm like, man, this story's getting pretty deep. Oh man, the conversations that are happening here aren't like they are in any other type of video game. What is going on? I'm feeling for these characters. I'm feeling for Madeline. I am worried for her. I'm upset with her at the same time. I'm upset with what's going on. And as it keeps breaking down, and then you come to terms that she is fighting herself. She's fighting to prove something of herself as it goes through, and people are there to help her. And it's nice to know that you don't need to do things alone. And that's why Theo's there, and that's why Granny's there, and so on. And sometimes you got to come to terms that you got to love the evil or dirty or disgusting parts of yourself to be happy and accomplish things. And I was like, God, this video game just made me feel. And I don't know if any game has ever come so close to making me feel, I don't know, like this way. Like it was very heavy. So how did you take your first time playing through the game, Tom? Like what was what thought process were you going through?
So I played this based off of, honestly, the hype from you. I was aware of this in the game sphere in the conversations of 2018. You know, it picked up a Game of the Year nomination at the Game Awards. Donkey reviewed it. If Donkey talks about it, I'm going to be like, oh my God. But I got into it specifically at your recommendation because of how much of an impression it made on you. I was like, dang, if this hit Josh this way, I got to hit this up. And I'm going to say this. I think Celeste is lovely and important, but I couldn't beat Celeste, Josh. There's an asterisk on that, but hear me out. As it is, I know that Maddie and the team, their goal was this one. They wanted it to be challenging but rewarding. But just for me, in terms of like my gaming abilities and things like that, this was just challenging. But it was never like insulting. Like this game has very positive vibes all the way. You know, it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about picking yourself back up. But there just is a point, I think it's around the Golden Ridge, where it gets really brutal. Because feathers? They don't just... It's just the fact that it goes from just kind of simple environmental physical hazards to like now there's high-speed winds. And now the gaps between jumps are longer. And what I think is interesting about the development of this game is that Maddie and Noel mentioned in interviews that there was kind of two philosophies they were designing this around. It was one, they really wanted this to appeal to like a speedrunning community. They liked the idea of fast-paced games. And this has caught on very much in the speedrunning community. There are some incredible speedruns of Celeste. But they also said that they were inspired by challenging NES-era games. And they cite Super Mario Bros. 3 as an inspiration. And it's just from the way I've grown up with gaming that they made this difficult for me because I don't do well with this genre. But this is a difference maker that I think is very important. So as we said, and as you said, this game's about mental health. It's about the fact that you shouldn't struggle alone and that it is a necessary and positive thing to, you know, ask for help and accept help. This game has a pretty compelling assist mode that doesn't feel insulting, and it doesn't feel like it's insulting you for taking it. Like even going into the menu of the assist mode, which I did, it's what I had to do to finish this game. They kind of just say, hey, we developed this to, you know, present a rewarding challenge, but if you need to turn this mode on, we're all about it, and here's the options you can use. And I had to customize it just to set it to something that I could navigate the game better. But I think just the fact that an optional mode can enhance what they're talking about in the game, you know, the importance of seeking out help and getting help if you need it. That's what I mean when I say like this game is beautiful. Like they thought about everything down to that, you know, all of that.
Yeah. And they mentioned towards the beginning of the game too, like this game has assist mode. We want you to try to experience it yourself. And it's one of those things like you have help here. Right. And like I said earlier, like you don't need to go through the game by yourself. Right. You can seek assistance. You can seek help. And that's such a very heavy, strong topic that it's like, listen, we know that you're on the verge of giving up. Like we're here to help you. And I love that because it makes it so like if you're not great at platformers or you're not great at this style of game, you have some sort of backup. Right. Mm-hmm. And one of, I think, the heaviest pieces of this game, and there's several heavy ones, and we're going to get into them, is it's in the first level at the very end. You get up to the monument, and it's one of my favorite just pieces of art in this game. And it's the monument, and it says, "This is a monument for all of those who struggle during the climb." And at first you would think like, oh, it's the people who fell on the mountain, like people who didn't make it to the top of the mountain, who didn't make it to the summit and stuff like that. But then you think deeper to it, and it's all the people who lost the battle to mental health, to mental illness, to anxiety, to depression, all that kind of stuff. And when you think about it that way, this game has a completely different meaning to it. Like it's not only about Madeline's struggles, it's about everybody's struggles who play the game.
You know, we're hitting on a lot of what this game's trying to do thematically. Josh, want to take a little detour into what this game does stylistically, because, again, we're gushing about what the idea is, but the way this game looks is really unique and incredible. So, like, all of the major gameplay unfolds in these 2D levels that I would almost call this, like, 22-bit. You know, like, it's got, like, it's far enough past the Super Nintendo style, but still retro enough that it doesn't seem too advanced. It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's maybe 22-bit is too high. I mean, like, it looks like it was a sweet spot between the NES and the Super Nintendo.
But then it's that NES graphics with the 60 frames per second that really does it.
Yeah. But then you get cool things like, I wouldn't so much call them cutscenes, but you get little pieces of still art. Or, like, at the end of every chapter, you get, like, these beautiful little, like, closing titles.
Yep.
Where everyone's done in this, like, really gorgeous art style. And the way the characters talk in this game, Josh. I would say that this game is second only to Banjo-Kazooie in terms of having non-audible spoken dialogue, because the way that Madeline and Theo and all them go, like,
yeah,
it's
very similar to how they talk in Animal Crossing, but there's something about the tones that they use in this game that are relaxing. You can tell when she's stressed out. You can tell when she's afraid.
Yeah.
You can tell it in the bleeps and bloops of their voices, and like
there's so much emotion.
Theo is just so cool, so laid back, so relaxed, and he's like,
easy every time.
Yeah.
Easy every time.
Oh man, I don't understand why the audio for them talking is so good, but every time I'm like, I just want to listen to you guys talk.
Yep.
I know you're talking about some heavy things right now, but I just like the sound of your voice.
Josh, how about your favorite characters in this game? Not just the ideas that they represent, but just the way that they're designed, the way they're performed. Who's your favorites?
I would definitely say Madeline. She is my favorite. She is my new bae. I used to have Mad Moxie, then she was replaced by May from Overwatch, and now Madeline is my new bae. She is just wonderful. She's adorable. She just wants to be happy, and I just love her. She's so gosh darn cute. Followed by Theo. Theo is just cool, calm, collected. Even in the middle of danger, he's like, let's take a selfie. Let's be cool about this. Like, whoa, we almost died. That was awesome. Like,
yeah, we're about to die on a gondola, but look how great this selfie was.
Right,
he's an influencer.
You're in the middle of you're in the middle of a haunted hotel, and he's just crawling around in the air ducts. Like, hey guys, what's up?
Like, we need to get out of here. Like, for real. Why are you having an adventure in this hotel? Get out.
Yeah, he's so funny.
Madeline's terrific, and her dynamic with Madeline, her I wouldn't call her an outright antagonist, because I don't want to say Madeline's evil. It's interesting. It reminds me of the movie Inside Out from Pixar, where the kind of moral of the story is that the two main characters, one represents pure happiness and then represents pure sadness, and they think that they're opposing forces. But in the end, they realize that the only way you can really evolve and become better is if you kind of accept that happiness and sadness are interconnected parts of life. And that's where I think, like, Madeline is really great, because you spend a bit of the game thinking, like, oh, she's just like this spooky evil twin, but she comes to mean so much more to Madeline, and it's such a well-written character. Theo is super charming, not gonna lie. I also really liked Mr. Oshiro. So he is a major character in Chapter 3, where you find this old abandoned hotel, and he's the ghost of the owner and manager, and he wants you to stay in the best room because he hasn't had a customer in years, and it's because he's dead, and his inability to let the hotel go keeps him trapped there. And you come to find that his obsession with keeping the hotel open has polluted it with all these negative spirits and this negative energy that can hurt you. And it's just such a fascinating character, because Madeline, wants to help him. She takes pity on him. And Madeline, eggs his negative side on. You're a failure. You're a loser. And it creates this, Mr. Oshiro boss that you have to escape. But in the end, you don't defeat him. This isn't a boss fight. You you escape the danger of like the angry Mr. Oshiro, but like you just come to a point where like Madeline has to leave the hotel and leave Oshiro behind, and it's very heartbreaking because it's like it's the game kind of saying that sometimes there's people you can't save, they have to kind of work on themselves.
But at the same time,
yeah,
you look at it as Madeline, where Madeline sidetracked her climb to the summit to try to help somebody else. So she put her worries and her determination stuff like to the side to kind of like do a side quest here to focus on taking care of somebody else to give her a reason to not get out of there. Where her bad side is like, well, you said you wanted to do this. Let's leave this guy behind. Let's do this. Like, where she's like, well, no, like she's coming up with excuses to try to help him get him better.
It's this interesting combination of empathy and ambition, and how sometimes they don't gel. And that's painful, because when you do care about people, sometimes that can cause you to not follow up on yourself and putting yourself first. But then if you put yourself first too much, you can abandon the people around you. And that's what I said. It's he's one of the most fascinating characters in the game because it makes you think about this stuff. Yeah. And it's just great. Every member of this cast does it in one way or another. And as I said, like, this is a small but great cast of characters.
When we get through most of the game here, you get to pretty much your main boss fight. And I'm going to say you're about 75% of the way through. You get through your main boss fight where you've had enough of Battleline. Battleline has had enough of you, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to talk to her, and she doesn't want to hear anything about it. So it's kind of a reverse boss fight almost. You attack her, where she's trying to prevent you from coming at her, and she's saying like, stay away, get back, you're nothing without me, you need me here. And Madeline's like, no, I don't need you. And that's like, I don't need the bad part of me, I don't need this. She's fighting with herself to pretty much try to get better, to make it to the summit. And man, the boss fight leading up to it, it's so tense and so fast paced that you're trying to do everything, but everything's crumbling around her at the same time. And there's so much metaphoric stuff happening right there too, to the point where you get her down and you beat her, and she's like, fine, you know what? Let's just end this. I don't care anymore. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about. This is about like, we need each other. We need to do this together. No matter how upset or angry you get, you need to have some sort of doubt, because you can't just constantly be optimistic, but you can't also be negative all the time either. And breaking it down for those two, and then joining forces together to realize that if they put their powers together, they can accomplish anything. And it's so powerful, that whole boss fight, the whole dialogue between the two of them, leading all the way up to the final level of the summit, which I'm going to say it right now. The summit is my favorite level of this entire game. I don't know.
The summit is very much like dessert, like that final boss fight in a way is more or less like the end of the game proper. And the summit is just like this mad sprint towards the end in a kind of celebratory way. It's like, you did it. The summit is your reward for the struggle you just went through, like metaphorically and in gameplay, style too. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
The first half of the summit is you pretty much going through different versions of the previous levels that you've done in just more harder fashion with the ability of the second dash. But then after you clear all of that, as you guys are going up to the final area there, Battleline looks at Madeline and she says, like, I actually think we can do this. And it's like, she's like, look at you being Miss Positivity right now. Like, they have that dialogue between each other. Like, both of you didn't think you could do it. Now you both can do it together. And when it pops up there and you see that first number hit, I think it's number 30, you're like, oh shit, we got this. Like, you hit 30, then you do a couple jumps and boom, 29, 28, 26. And as it's going, the numbers are counting down, and like, you're getting like so antsy, because when you hit number 1, that's it. We're done. Yep. It's over. Yep. And you get up there to the top and you see the flag, and you take a couple steps and she sits down, and that's it. It's like, we did it. And
absolutely. Yep.
It's one of those, like, it's like playing a Legend of Zelda game. You know what I mean? Here, take a walk with me on this one. the game's not really about the dungeons. It's not really about all the stuff that goes on. It's the overall journey of those games, right? It is the long story driven journey, right? Like you felt like you went on an adventure with this character. You've seen all these things, you've done all this stuff, and now you are a hero in that one. This one is you went through all of these troubles, you went through all of these problems to get to the top of this mountain, and when you see it, you walk over there and you did it. That was it. Like at the beginning of the game, it says you can do this, and you did.
Josh, are you trying to say? I think what you're trying to say is, it's not about how fast you get there. It's not about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb.
Yes, the quote Hannah Montana / Miley Cyrus herself. But it really is.
I agree with you completely. I agree with you 100%. Yes, and that's the end of the initial story. You know, you reach the summit, and Madeline and Badeline take in their personal victory together, and it's this nice, quiet, just beautiful moment that the game just lets you sit in, and I like that a lot. And then we have a small little epilogue. You know, they come back to the cabin where this all started, Granny's house, like I said, the little old woman who kind of busts you, and everyone's friends, and Madeline bakes a pie, and depending on how many of the strawberries you collected throughout the game, it will affect the quality of the pie you make. You'll either have a dinky little pie that no one really likes, or you have a big juicy pie that everyone's just really into. But that's not the end of the full story. As Josh mentioned kind of earlier, there were 2 pieces of free DLC that were released, in sessions after the game came out. Now, Josh, I just got to tell you right up front, the 2 pieces of DLC, the first one's called The Core,
where
you're literally exploring the core of Mount Celeste, and then the second one's called Farewell, which explores a final kind of end to a relationship Celeste has with one of the main cast. Both of these DLCs can only be progressed through in one way or another if you manage to find and collect these very well hidden, hard to find heart collectibles in the game. So I'm just going to tell you straight up, I had to watch just basically YouTube compilations of the core and Farewell, and it's not because I wasn't interested, it's just it was very hard to find these things. And this is just one of the things where I will say I was a little taken aback at the restrictions they put on that. Now, that's just me. You know, I know some other gamers are probably like, yeah, I'll go back and I'll explore more. And that's great. That's great for you. But for me, I was kind of bummed. I was like, oh, why wasn't this, like, I don't know, based off strawberries or something? Or I don't know. It hurt more in Farewell, I just want to say, because they let you get through about half of Farewell, and then they put up the barrier that requires hearts, and it took me aback so much because I was like,
the nice thing with that though is it is a chapter in that level, so you could start right there when you collect the rest of those hearts. You can go back in and get to that. You can start right from that point, which is really nice. Okay. Yeah. It is one of those things that kind of reward the collectible people in the game. And I understand, like, that would be very heart-wrenching for a lot of people who want to see the story to its fullest extent. The core is good, I will say. It adds a lot of new mechanics, a lot of new, like, enemy type things. It's a more hot and cold elemental thing that you could do in the level too. It's fine. It's good. You get a crystal heart at the end of it. Plus you get another mixtape and you get another B-side and C-side of the core as well. Don't worry, I did those as well. Farewell. I need to, because I haven't talked about this really with anybody since playing Farewell. I beat Farewell a couple days ago. It is ridiculously hard. It took me multiple hours to beat Farewell. Farewell, and I'm going to say this, is probably the greatest ending I've ever played in a video game. The game itself, ending and story and stuff like that, made me feel some things. I sat down at the end of Farewell. I sat my controller down and I just went like it was I had a really deep breath and I was like, I can't believe that I witnessed that. I didn't think. I know if I would have showed Becca this, she would have probably been in tears the entire time.
It is emotionally affecting. What would you just say kind of did it for you?
Okay.
I mean, do we want to spoil it? Because I feel like there's something about the end I want to talk about, but I don't know how much of it we have to spoil. Do you think?
So I think we got to spoil it because, like you said, if you don't collect all the crystal hearts, you're not going to be able to see it through. Farewell takes place a couple years after the actual initial climb of the mountain itself, where Madeline has stayed in touch with Granny over the years. She stayed in touch with Theo. She stayed in touch with everybody. And during this time, Granny apparently passes away. And the game starts off, the level starts off very beautifully. Very colorful skies, very, everything's super colorful, very where we last left off. And you see Granny up there on top of the little mountain that she's on, the little hill thing. And as you get to her, a flash of lightning hits, everything goes gray, rain's coming down, and there's a tombstone where Granny was. And it's like, oh, man, so this is where we're going. And I understood Farewell was going to be you're saying goodbye to somebody. I didn't know who, I didn't know how, I didn't know why. This whole DLC, this whole level, this whole area of the game is Madeline coping with the loss of Granny, right? It's not even her grandmother either. She's just someone who's helped her, who has guided her through this whole time, and she stayed in touch with. And Madeline can't come to terms with it, to the point where she forces the battle line out of her. She says, you know what, leave me alone. I'm going to take care of this myself. I'm going to deal. You don't want to help me. And battle line's like, listen, you need to let go. You need to understand. You need to move on.
If I could just throw this out here.
Yeah.
It's almost as if Madeline is entering a Mr. Oshiro-esque situation in here, that she is so stuck on something that Madeline's the only one who realizes that danger. They don't say that or reference it, but the more you talk about it, it's like, yeah, it's kind of what the trap that Madeline's fallen into. It's not letting the past go. Yeah. So Josh, sorry to interrupt you. You want to take it from there?
Yeah. So shortly after that, though, you see this bird fly across the screen, and this bird has kind of followed you throughout the whole game originally. Mm-hmm. It gave you the hints. It told you how to do stuff, and Madeline believes that the spirit of Granny is inside this bird because the bird followed you throughout the mountain and throughout all the levels and helped you. So it's almost like Granny was watching over you. So Madeline's determined to get to this bird because it's Granny. She's going to be able to bring Granny back from the dead. And Madeline's like, it's not going to happen. You're dreaming. It's not how this is going to end. You're going to get hurt even more. And Madeline doesn't believe it. So the whole level is the chase of this bird.
Actually, Josh, it's kind of crazy. I didn't even put this in my notes, but just talking about it out loud. Yeah, Farewell is the 5 stages of grief. We've got denial in the beginning because she is like, oh, Granny can't be gone. Oh, I can't believe I didn't go to the funeral. Oh, no, Then we have stage 2, anger, where Madeline is trying to point out to Madeline, you shouldn't be holding on this much. You have to let it go. And Madeline's like, get out of here. I don't need your help. That's anger. Then we've got a combo of bargaining and depression. Madeline chases down this bird because she believes if she gets the bird, that's going to bring Granny back. So that's the bargaining. And then we have the sadness of failure because when she does get the bird, it turns out it's just a bird. And she kind of hurts it in the process of catching it. And then she gets sad. That's depression. And then finally acceptance is when Madeline helps her to help the bird, to make up for hurting the bird. They kind of help it escape this weird otherworldly cave system that they're trapped in.
Right.
And then Madeline ultimately does encounter the spirit of Granny in something that looks like, the stereotypical version of heaven. There's clouds everywhere. And she just accepts that she's gone, but the help that Granny gave Madeline in life was important and valuable, and that's how Madeline will keep Granny alive. And then, of course, it's revealed that this was all a dream. There's even moments while the level's still going on where Madeline's like, oh, this is all a dream, crap. And then eventually Madeline wakes up.
You asked, what is it about it that hooked me, that got me, that makes me feel like that?
Yeah, the emotional hook. The emotional hook.
What
Farewell.
was it, right?
What got you? Yeah.
And it was towards it's not the end. It's right before it, I think. where Madeline and Battleline are talking to each other, where Battleline gets out of her and she's like, listen, you need to stop. And like, it's a very hard conversation that she has technically with herself, where Madeline's like, take me with you, Granny. Like, coping with the idea of possibly not being alive anymore because she can't go on without her. And Battleline telling her, you can't go with her. You need to stop this. You need to, like, this isn't right. Like, and it's such a deep conversation where Battleine's telling her to go away. And Battleine's like, listen, I'm not forcing you. I'm asking you to stop, because you're not going to make it. You're not going to be able to come out of this good. She's like, I miss her too, but we have to let her go. And that conversation, like, it's not an easy conversation to put in a game. How do you do it, right? Battleline talks about how it's not healthy. There's no way to come out of this positive. There's no way that you're going to be able to continue on if you're going to go down this route. And it's so heavy, so strong, to the point where Madeline drops on the ground and Battleine's like comforting her, because she knows, like, that's it. Like, she knows that she's wrong. She knows that she did, like, she did not, she knows that there's no way that Granny can come back. And it's up to her now that she needs to be able to let it go. And you go through the rest of the game to the final point that gets me, that really got me, when you guys are going up towards the end and you're making the final ascent, and Battleline grabs a hold of you and says, say goodbye to her for me. And it was like, that right there was like the one single tear. Cause, you know what I mean? Like, cause it's so good. Like, to know that this old bat, helped her, you know, and it's saying goodbye to, you know, we've all had grandparents, you know, that may have passed away.
I've never had grandparents. I just spawned from, you know, the essence of the earth. No.
But like, or a family member or anybody like that's passed away, right? And we, you know, some people take it, you know, some people don't take it too well. Some people need to understand that, you know, it's a part of life. And it's just one of those things that a video game gave me, like, a mindset of, like, this is what people feel sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, the loss. And it was a unique feeling on my behalf, to the point where I was just like, you got me, Maddie, you got me.
So just to round out Farewell, we have this adorable little, you know, story moment where Madeline wakes up in her bed and she has a little, like, Skype session with Theo. They catch up, and Theo mentions that he found out through going through a box of photos that his grandfather actually visited Mount Celeste in his youth, and he shows Madeline an old photo that reveals that Theo's grandfather and Granny actually were friends in their youth. And it kind of just, like, wows Madeline. It kind of puts this nice little, like, element of destiny on it, or just connection, you know, human connection, because that's what this game is partially about. It's the help we find in others and how we connect in ways we didn't expect. And that's how the story overall of Celeste ends. So, Josh, I want to just have a couple brief chats about the legacy of this game, because even in 3 years, this game has managed to make quite an impact in the world of gaming. And I want to ask you, are you aware of the little visual Easter egg, an important visual Easter egg that's hidden in the final cutscene of Farewell?
No, but I want to talk about another Easter egg that's inside the game too. So you tell me about yours, and I'll tell you about mine.
So, as we've been mentioning a lot throughout the episode, this game was developed by Maddie Thorson. Now, Maddie's dead name at this point, their original birth name was Matt Thorson, but Maddie has come to say that in the time spent developing Celeste, the character of Madeline and their struggles kind of helped Maddie identify and accept their non-binary self. And that is why they chose the name Maddie and how they currently identify. And how this kind of came out in both the press and the gaming community is in the final cutscene of Farewell, there is a gay pride and transgender pair of flags on Madeline's desk. And so when fans saw that, they were asking like, oh, what does this mean? Does this mean Madeline's gay? Does this mean Madeline's transgender? And Maddie came out and said, yes, to me, the character of Madeline is supposed to be a transgendered woman. And it's through developing Madeline and, making this game that helped me accept my non-binary self. And Madeline, as a result, has come to now be kind of considered a very well-written and well-developed transgender character. And the beauty of that is, like, it's not like that's supposed to be, like, the core of Celeste, but it's still important. But Maddie Thorson did say their intention was, I wanted it to be just introduced subtly, and I wanted it to be part of Madeline without being like the defining thing, that's part of who she is as a being. But like, this game's still about her mental struggles, and I think now that we know everything, it's like, wow, you intertwined all of this amazingly. Like,
it is story well written. I don't. There's no other. I mean, there's really no other way I can say this. Like, it is a very well written story that there's nothing you need to change.
There's only so many synonyms for fantastic we can use before we just word it out. And I know exactly what you mean. But tell me about the Easter egg you found in the game. I'm interested to hear.
So it's not. I mean, I noticed it because of collecting all the pieces in the game.
Sure.
I think. Oh man, I can't remember what level it is. I should know from playing it. I think it might be Reflections. There's a crystal heart in that level, and if you go off to the screen, you'll see a white box. It's like a little white box, and it's the box from Super Mario Brothers 3, like the little platform boxes, right?
Oh, with the musical note on them.
No, it's like a long, it's like a long box, like a long rectangular box.
Like the ones with like the screws in it. Yeah.
Correct, right.
Okay.
There's one of those in the level. So if you know anything about Super Mario Brothers 3, if you jump on top of it and hold down for 3 seconds, you fall behind it. And when you do, you climb up the back of the level. So you climb up the background of the level, go all the way up to the top where the crystal heart is. And that's how you get the crystal heart of that level. So it's really cool that it's a Super Mario Brothers 3 reference for the game, to get you a hidden piece of the game. It's just really fun.
That is A, very cool, and B, super frustrating because, like, again, they hit those crystal hearts so intrinsically.
Yeah.
I never would have been able to think of that. The soundtrack of this game, like we mentioned up top, I'm just going to say it again. I think he's about to pull it out. He's got it on vinyl. He's got two. So what are the differences what are the two of those? Explain that.
So this is the original soundtrack here.
Okay.
The original soundtrack on vinyl. This is the piano collection. So it's the entire soundtrack on piano.
So did Lena Raine do the piano arrangements as well?
I believe she did. Yes. Yep. And she was given full reign of of the soundtrack to do whatever she wanted to with it, and it is beautiful. Every single song is great. Even the remixes on the B side and C sides of this game are awesome and great and just so good. I put this soundtrack on so much, and just like I'm cleaning around the house or hanging out around the house, because it's so nice, it's so subtle. When it picks up, you're like, oh, I know what's happening right now in the game. I know what she's experiencing. I know what she's feeling. And then going through when you're getting to the summit and it kicks back to the first level's theme, and you're just like, we got this, because it's like, you've come to it, you're like, we got this, like, crack the neck, crack the fingers, like, we're going to the top now. There's nothing stopping us, because we've been through so much shit that nothing's putting us down now. And it's so motivational. Like, it's so good because, like, the dark parts, the upsetting times, the reflection parts, and then it's like, this is triumph now.
Hell yeah. For me, one of those triumphant pieces that I truly loved is in Farewell. There's this kind of Celtic violin piece that mixes in with the 8-bit chiptune, and it's so gorgeous and so good. Truly love that. Truly love all of the work that Lana Rain did for this game. Like, 5 stars to you. Absolutely well deserved.
Hey, this game's perfect. Like this game is perfect. I'm sorry. Like there's not a bad thing about this game. Yes, I'm not a huge fan of the feather pieces of this game because that is where I get most of my deaths from. But God, if this game isn't great. It's fantastic.
Well, I'm very happy we finally got to talk about it, so you can kind of like, express what this means to you. And yeah, like playing this was quite a journey that I really enjoyed. I guess that's just an absolute recommend from both of us. And who would have imagined one of the most critically acclaimed, beloved games of all time would get a recommendation from both of us? Well, Josh, I had a great time with this game. We know you did. And honestly, I'm just really excited because for the rest of this year, we're going to be going deeper and deeper into gaming's past. This might honestly be the last, most recent game we do for now. But that just leaves a lot of time traveling to do. So until next time, this has been Tom.
And Josh.
And we'll see you in the future.
Well, that's all the time that we can spend in the past, so thanks for listening. Subscribe to A Cast of the Past on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And stay up to date with The Cast of the Past by making sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There you can be the first to know when new episodes drop, as well as joining in on discussions on all things gaming. And until next time, we'll see you in the future.